Alright, so quick update on things before this video starts. Xseed has announced the official release date for Granblue Versus in North America. We are going to get it on March 3rd, so yeah, that's a whole month off from the GP release date. I'm a little late on this, but try not to directly attack Xseed for this, as Cygames already mentioned in the middle of it last year in a Game Press interview that they are the ones in charge of all the localization, which includes the translation and the English dubbing. So Xseed is more of a distributor for the game than anything else. I don't think they had much control over the delay. So yeah, I'm excited. Disappointed that I had to do this, but I already got the JP version and will be saving my RPG mode playthrough for when the English version is out, which once again, March 3rd. So that's basically a whole month of me not playing through the RPG mode. But yeah, should be refreshing and absolutely hilarious playing through the story with the dub. Moving on to this video topic, we're going to go over a quick info dump on the setting of Granblue Fantasy. This is going to be very generalized information on how the world works and how you can identify some things a bit better. For the most part, the characters of Granblue are simple, easy to understand, follow, at the surface level. Their personalities are very basic. You can get at least half of their story just from how they act. And you're going to get that from the character interactions in Granblue Versus and Relink and all of them. So that's not really too much of a problem. The writing for the series also isn't really any kind of literary genius. Most of the stories are played very safe, but there are quite a few bits and pieces of lore presented throughout the years that the game's been out. I won't be going into deep lore, at least not for a while. I might end up revisiting this in the future and going into greater detail, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. I'm more focused on Versus than anything else, so maybe when Relink comes out, I'll go deeper into lore stuff, but not now. I'm just going to talk about the essentials. So let's start off with the title of the game. Obviously, Granblue is like two words in one. The first word being grand, which is, well, which we all know the meaning of, and the blue stands for the color of the sky. We all know how Japan loves butchering the English language. Like, this is nothing new. This is nothing new. And a different interpretation will be the main character's name, Gran, as being the first part of the word Granblue, and Lyria would stand for the blue portion. Lyria is frequently called the girl in blue by many characters, but her hair makes it more obvious, like just blue hair. So yeah, if you interpret Granblue this way, it's mainly because Gran and Lyria are both life linked together through the story, so the title can be interpreted two different ways. Then there's the fantasy portion. Just a little tidbit here is that Jita's name actually appears in this part of the title. She's the female protagonist and the alternative to Gran, so basically a different timeline. If you read the katakana in reverse, that's how you can actually read out Jita, but it doesn't really work for English, unfortunately. Also, I like to make a little joke that Jita is lifelink to the fans of Granblue because she's the more popular main character pick among the general player base. So that's just a little joke of mine, but nothing special. Anyways, as everyone should have guessed from the title, Granblue is about this grand adventure going through the skies, and the main story beats are about being hopeful of the future or to live with freedom and all of that. It comes up numerous times in the story. A lot of the story characters deal with some form of being shackled down physically or emotionally before finally breaking free to live their lives to the fullest. Yeah, Granblue is very much in line with other fantasy games, particularly drawing from Final Fantasy as the main inspiration. In fact, some of the music and art for Granblue are done by people that have worked on Final Fantasy games in the past. That was the big selling point for this game. Other parallels with Final Fantasy exist, like most characters can use magic of sorts, just to amplify their attacks or to use like more dedicated spells. Even the races are derivative from Final Fantasy. There's a counterpart for pretty much each of them. I'll talk about this a little later in the video when I talk about the races, but yeah, not much else to go into here actually. It's really straightforward. Alright, so here's a brief overview on where the game takes place. Let's start from the top. The planet featured in Granblue is not Earth as we know it. It is some unnamed planet that's split off into two separate sections, the Sky Realm and the Crimson Horizon. The Sky Realm being the whole area above the seas of clouds in the sky, and the Crimson Horizon is this red area that's below the clouds and more on like the surface of the planet. You can kind of see this red peeking through the clouds a little bit in some pictures. It's not too important, but yeah. Now we aren't really limited to just these areas, as we do have the Astral Realm, which hasn't really been expanded on yet. That should be something that's done in the future, probably after this story arc. And then we have places like Pandemonium, where the fallen angels are locked away in jail. And that's kind of like in between the Sky Realm and the Crimson Horizon. but you don't have to worry about most of this. All you really need to know is that 99% of Granblue takes place in the Sky Realm, which is above the clouds in the sky. It's basically planet Earth, but everyone lives above the clouds instead of on the ground. The reason I'm going over this is because the name Sky Realm is one of the reasons that a lot of terminology has the word sky in it for Granblue, so it's very on the nose. Just keep that in mind. Even like the supers in Granblue Versus are called Skybound Arts and Super Skybound Art. So yeah, that's kind of like the reason everything has sky in it. Okay, now we know the main setting takes place above the clouds. If you narrow that down, we come to the numerous floating islands in the sky that everyone like just lives on. These islands tend to be unique to each other, just about all of them are different in scenery and function. One of them could have a beach, another one could have like a volcano or something. Usually they don't share a lot of similarities around each other. You can kind of think of each floating island as its own little country, with like different people and different values. Because the islands are like in the skies, the only way for a person to really travel between them is with an airship. And yeah, those airships are basically just flying ships in the sky. The main airship to keep note of is called the Grancypher. It's the ship that Gran and his friends, they travel around on the Grancypher. So in Granblue Versus, it's also a stage that you can fight on, and it's what you walk around on in the player lobbies. You can also go inside of it as well. Conveniently, it also has Gran's name in the title. Well, story-wise, Gran's father used a ship that also had Gran in the title as well, and it was the sister ship to the Grancypher. So yeah, and this was all before Gran was actually born. So just gonna throw that out there. You know, you could just make your assumptions on that. So these flying ships are the main source of transportation. Sometimes people ride ships to other planets for vacations or shopping purposes. Sometimes they just live on their island and never visit another one at all. Like that's probably what I would do, just chilling. But the big thing is that some people form together a mercenary crews and then travel around on one of the airships that I was talking about. They then complete different jobs on islands that they visit to make a living while also exploring the world. These are called Skyfarers, and it's what Gran and his friends end up becoming through the story. So just know that Skyfarers are flying around on these ships and traveling between islands just about all the time. Altogether, people that live in the Sky Realm are called Skydwellers, but that's not really a term every character will use. You mostly hear this from higher level characters or beings like in the world of Granblue. Really, it's just a different way to generalize mortals together because humans aren't the only race. Moving on, we'll go directly into these different races. First, we have humans. Pretty self-explanatory. If you want to know more about the human race, you can just look in the mirror and just call it a day. I'm not really going to go into humans, like come on, it's humans. Most playable characters tend to be human as well, which is reflected pretty accurately in Granblue Versus. If you look at the roster, it's primarily humans. So yeah, next in the races would be the Airrunes. I said earlier that the races of Granblue parallel Final Fantasy races. I was mostly referring to Final Fantasy 11 and 14. In this case, the Airrunes are based on the Mithras or like the Miqultes. Now, this race is a hybrid between humans and various animals, which make a lot of them very popular for the fanbase. Their key features are not only the animal ears that they have, like in place of the human ones, they do not have human ears. They also, the fact that their backs are exposed no matter what, male or female, you just aren't going to cover up their backs. It seems to be joked about to not being very comfortable for them to wear things on their back, but otherwise wasn't really explained. Airrunes in general tend to be a bit more on the agile side of things. A lot of the art involves them in very flexible poses and all that kind of thing. Just look at the ears and you'll find them very easily. Some Airrunes also have tails, but apparently that's reserved for very special cases like pure royal blood and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, very popular race. Expect to see more Airrunes in the future. I think that there's a lot more that they're going to bring into the game. After that, we move on to the less popular races. First up are the Drafts, a personal favorite of mine. Of course, just look at my avatar and you'll understand. You'll definitely understand my core values. I think the males were inspired by the Galka race of Final Fantasy 11, just these big, tall, lumbering, like not ogres or anything, but they're just big, tall, like physical monsters. But Final Fantasy 14 actually introduced a similar race called the Aura. Because of this, I don't think Drafts are a direct ripoff of Final Fantasy races, but they're pretty close. Anyways, Drafts are the biggest case of sexual dimorphism in Granblue Fantasy, and they are a type of like human bovine hybrid. The males are these hulking 7 to 8 foot tall bodybuilders. Then we look at the females and oh my. 4-foot-tall short stacks, well-endowed assets, soft, pudgy, dare I say it, the thickest race in Granblue. If you take their short stature into the equation at least, they would definitely be some of the more guilty pleasure sort of race. The females can't even reach 5 feet tall. Like, they're really struggling just to get a few more inches out there. So the deal with this race is that the males are supposed to be these hulking bulls and the females are cows. You can just easily spot drafts by height and gender, but more importantly, you can see their horns and their unique ears that they have. I'd say drafts are the typical heavy-duty race in fantasy games. Very strong, very powerful, but a bit less on the intelligent side. In this case, a lot of drafts either talk very slow or are very simple thinkers. Like, they really don't think too far about certain things. They're very upfront about what they feel. And obviously each race has their exceptions. That's a big thing in Granblue, but the norms still exist, and the majority of characters play out with their stereotypes. But yeah, anime bovines are a very powerful thing. I'm very happy that they exist. Then there are the Harvins, which naturally end up the least popular race in the game. It's the little elf race from Final Fantasy, the Tarus, and I think the Lalafels from Final Fantasy 14. I actually don't remember. I think they're the Lalafels. I think that was it. But yeah, always forget their names for some reason. But yeah, the usual fan term for Harvins is that they are potatoes. Visually, they look like pudgy toddlers. Not really a child at all, but like some kind of deformity. Like some cute little deformity, I guess. I'd say that Harvins are a bit on the more intelligent side. At least a lot of wise characters are part of the Harvin race. There are those few small packages of mass destruction, of course, you know, like Charlotta. But we actually had an event where the villain was complaining about how limited he was in hand-to-hand combat thanks to being a Harvin. But yeah, don't expect too many of these characters to be playable. They aren't really popular at all, but a few of them are pretty cool. So you might see a samurai type Harvin get in the game or something. So yeah. And that's it. Those are the 4 core races of Granblue Fantasy that live in a sky realm. Humans, Aruns, Drafts, and Harvins. Now, these aren't the only races, but they are the main ones to know about. There is a completely different category in the game called Other, which was originally called Unknown, but you know, Other kind of makes more sense. It represents other races from traditional fantasy archetypes like vampires, werewolves, fairies, robots, all of what you would expect pretty much. And like there's even moon people as well, and it gets kind of silly. Dragons are also natural beings that exist in Granblue, which are sometimes friendly or sometimes enemies. And then moving on to the enemy side of things, we start seeing monster groups like mermaids, zombies, giant rats, crabs, wyverns, bugs, you know, just all the natural monster types that you see in fantasy games. Tons of fantasy archetypes and all that in the Sky Realm. So there's plenty to look at here. And moving on past them, we start going to some of the more lore heavy races that are like more specific to Granblue. First up will be the Astrals. Like I was talking about before, mostly every part of Granblue takes place in a sky realm above the clouds, but the Astrals apparently have their own astral realm that they live at, which isn't greatly detailed at this point besides being implied that it's a mirror image of the sky realm. And as another hint, Astrals are called the people of the stars, while Skydwellers are people of the sky. So just throwing that out there too, you know, people of the stars for people of the sky, they're pretty on the nose about this. For this race, you can consider them to look like humans, but much stronger. Some of the Astrals we currently have are named after mythological figures for pretty good reason because they're so powerful. They also live for a very, very long time, almost immortal actually, and it's to the point that a lot of Astrals seem a bit more on the godly side of things, certain viewpoints in life. In my opinion, I think their long lives are the main reason for a lot of the personality shifting towards being bored, looking for some entertainment or something, or like just indifference to more emotional things. The big thing that the Astrals were a part of was ruling over the Sky Realm for a brief time in the past. They actually go over this in the very beginning of the game. At a certain point, the Skydwellers ended up fighting back and fighting them off. So the Astrals then decided, you know what, it's too much of a struggle for us. Let's just get out of here. Let's leave. The tools the Skydwellers used were pretty important. Revenant weapons were used, which are a focus of the Eternal storyline. I don't think I'll go into that though. That's really not relevant for this point. And the most important thing are the primal beasts. Sometimes people call them primals. So primal beasts, primals, same thing. And these are the final big race of Granblue. Like the Astrals that made them, primals come in many different forms. Some are based directly on animals, humans, or just like some combination of the two. And others are based off mythological figures, like some of the Astrals actually. Like in this case though, they take on the form of like Norse, Indian, and like Greek gods, or even like angels, and many other things. So you can think of something and like a name through history, and there's probably like a primal beast that's based off of it. Each primal beast tends to have a specific purpose or function that makes them unique from other ones. Some just use different elements in the world, which are fire, water, earth, wind, light, dark, all of them. Technically, there was a 7th element at some point. This was recently introduced, but it's pretty much gone now, apparently. And yeah, it's not really all that important. But yeah, other primal beasts can do other things like create zombies, change emotions of people, get rid of your memories or change them, reset time, travel between dimensions. Like it's crazy. Like they can fulfill like promises and wishes, and like just way too many things. Like they govern over very specific and abstract concepts. That's how primal beasts work. So yeah, Astrals decided to create primal beasts as weapons of war against the Skydwellers in the past, but some of the primals ended up being used to fight back. And now, although many are still hostile, a lot of them live hand in hand with the Skydwellers. So normally there are 1 or 2 primal beasts on a single floating island that I was talking about, and they are a very big part of people's lives, whether they know it or not. Sometimes they're thought of as like legends, but they still do exist on the island, and other times they're actually just seen hand in hand with people. Key things about primal beasts to talk about. For one, they have varying sizes. Some of them can create a smaller form for themselves that mimic the size of humans, but a lot of them end up being very giant in comparison. Some primals can talk as well, but a lot of them don't, or they may have very limited language. In fact, the intelligence on a few primal beasts are limited on purpose, so that's actually a pretty big thing. The big character trait with the ones that do talk is that they are very ignorant of how Skydwellers live their daily lives. So they all get like very interested in minor concepts like food, festivals, and all that kind of stuff, because it's not really something they need. But they're just like, wow, I can't believe these mortals are eating food. That's kind of ridiculous. Altogether, that's the world of Granblue in a nutshell. And everyone lives on islands above the clouds in Skyrealm. Skyfarers use ships to travel between islands, and the main races are humans, Eruns, Drafts, and Harvins, with Astrals and Primals being their own thing as well. And our human characters that are going to be appearing in Granblue Versus are Gran, Catalina, Lancelot, Percival, Zeta, Ceres, and Jita. So yeah, yeah, most of the cast is human. Eruns are Fairy and Lorraine. Drafts are Ladiva, Valzaraga, and Aramea. Harvins are Charlotta only. Like I said, don't expect many Harvins. And for Astrals, Chaos Bringer, or Bubs, he's an Astral that experiments on himself with the primal beasts, or like multiple primal beasts. I forgot how many that he did, but he experimented on himself to get more powerful, And Bellio is a primal beast, one of the first ones created actually, so he's stronger than the average one and also a lot smarter. He's actually pretty much a genius. He might be one of the reasons the limiter was made. Compared to the bosses in Granblue Versus that you're gonna fight against, you're gonna fight against like the standard ones like Colossus, Yggdrasil, I guess Rose Queen, and I don't know if the other ones that they showed, but yeah, those bosses are not as smart as Bellio or as powerful. So yeah, a good JRPG that I can relate Granblue and similarities to would be Xenoblade Chronicles 2. There are quite a few similarities between it and Granblue, to the point that when I played through Xenoblade 2, I felt familiar with the world from the very beginning. The final thing to know is that the god of the world of Granblue is this dragon called Bahamut, who also appears on the main side game's logo and is a big part of their previous mobile game, Rage of Bahamut. Who would have thought, right? Rage of Bahamut would have Bahamut as a central focus. Wow, what a wild and crazy concept. But yeah, a lot of characters are shared between Granblue and Rage of Bahamut, so it's interesting when you look up the stories, art, or like the flavor text of some of the cards in that game and how they compare to Granblue's. Rage of Bahamut stuff also is included in Shadowverse. Like most of the card art actually comes from Rage of Bahamut. So yeah, you can actually see some of the little stories there too. Just a tiny bit more info. Bahamut came to the Granblue world and worked his magic to create the Sky Realm, but eventually it was forced to split apart, and one part went to create the Astral Realm while the other kept governing the Sky Realm. Main goal right now is that the two parts of Bahamut are trying to fuse back together. Apparently that's a bad thing. So yeah, they're trying to fuse back together, and Vern and Lyria are both directly related to this process and are related to each part of Bahamut each. Once again, easy to understand, and now you know that these two characters are important for a reason. That's why they're featured a lot. So they're not just throwaways, they're there for a reason. And that's about all you need to know about Granblue, like just at a surface level. When going to Granblue Versus, like if you just know this video and you watch this video, you probably have a pretty good idea of the world of Granblue. Not including plot purposes, of course. I don't think that's really a big deal. They'll explain it when you play the game. Hope you guys like this video. I tried to keep things very basic, very simple, from the ground up, so that just about anyone can understand it. Well, at least I can understand it. So I don't know. I can't really speak for everyone else. I was hoping to make character videos once I had more footage to play with in the background. A lot of the footage I have for the beta test, I actually deleted them at one point to save up space on my hard drive. Like that was like way earlier last year. But then I got like a better SSD, and now I'm just kind of like, man, I wish I did not delete that footage. So I only have most of the day one stuff, which was all Catalina and Fairy matches. So I don't really know if my upload speed also is good enough to be streaming this game, but without having like messed up internet or laggy matches. I'll look into that, but I'll try my best to just record everything I can and try to make some fun content. I just want to mess around a little bit. Anyways, thanks for whoever out there was watching the video, and later.